Alright, hello and welcome to another Why Would You Use. So today we're going to be going over a weapon that I talk about a lot, I feel, but that has never gotten a Why Would You Use, and that weapon is the Prisma Grakata. So, this weapon is quite good. It competes with the Soma Prime, but it's got some quirks to it that can be rectified, but it's a little bit on the odd side, I suppose, in that this weapon is very expensive to get and put together the full build for, but is worth it to some people, because some people just want their Daka in Grakata format, and that's commendable. Also, this weapon, as you could see, if it suits your liking in terms of its aesthetic, you're going to use this whether, doesn't matter. Either way, you're going to use this because it's a good weapon that looks real nice. So this is the build. This is rather basic. I use Stabilizer for reasons that we will go over. But on this, there are a few things that can be changed out depending on your taste. First of all, Malignant Force. I have Malignant Force here because I prefer the higher status, so whenever this weapon needs to strip armor, it can. Worth noting, bladed rounds, obviously much higher damage. If you're fighting groups, you're going to get much higher damage out of bladed rounds than you're going to get out of Malignant Force. That goes without saying. Stabilizer. This is a somewhat taste choice in that Stabilizer, if you are focused on getting headshots, Stabilizer will actively increase the damage that you output because of how much more accurate you can be. This weapon is actually quite accurate given that you can control the recoil, but spoilers, you're not firing at the maximum fire rate if you can control the recoil without Stabilizer. With Stabilizer, you can get a massive amount of headshots, even over great distances, because this pretty much completely eliminates all recoil from the weapon, as we'll show. Without Stabilizer, see, the recoil can be quite extreme. But with Stabilizer, straight as a fucking arrow, pretty much. A massive increase to how accurate you can be, even over distances. And while here to that pillar may be a little outside of where you're normally going to be fighting a lot of enemies, even up close, the recoil will miss you a lot of shots in many cases, especially if you're trying to hit the headshots. So I prefer Stabilizer in many cases with this weapon. Of course, there's also the potential to use Heavy Caliber, although with the accuracy of this weapon and the recoil, if you're going to use Heavy Caliber and not Stabilizer, you're going to have a very bad time outside of shotgun ranges, and then of course at those ranges, I'd very much suggest a shotgun for you. So with that, it's pretty basic. There's a few things that are basically swapped out to taste, really. You could go without Stabilizer and throw in Argon Scope and throw in bladed rounds and do it that way. It's pretty viable in kind of all those configurations. The mainstay, of course, is Serration Split Chamber, Point Strike, Vital Sense. Those don't go anywhere on this weapon under pretty much any circumstances, so expect to throw those in. With that, let's do our normal test. This weapon, as I said, competes with Soma Prime and has pretty much no trouble with this test. It's also a very fun weapon to use, as all of the Grakata are. The Grakata series is a really fun series of weapon that performs pretty well. It also has a very fast reload, which with its high magazine size, and of course not quite Soma Prime magazine size, but its high magazine size, only 80 less, the very fast reload helps it out tremendously. As you can see, it can kick out a good amount of damage. And its sustained fire is quite nice on groups. Also, as anyone who's been using the Grakatas knows, the sound these things make, very satisfying. The one downside this weapon has may be that it has status over the Soma Prime, which may sound weird, but in terms of getting headshots, whenever you proc impact, it's usually going to miss you quite a few shots if you are not prepared to be proccing impact. So while it is some bonus CC, and obviously the added armor stripping can be very helpful, occasionally it will cost you a little bit of damage. And did we miss anyone? It's everybody. So now, to show, we are going to... Oh, also, it's very much worth noting, I'd highly suggest using this with Carrier, as if you do not, you'll find yourself running out of ammo. If you use carrier, however, I've had no trouble at all with any ammo conservation at like pretty much any level, really, outside of like extreme cases, of course, which is beyond sortie. Speaking of beyond sortie, we're going to do some beyond sortie tests. So with this, Corrupted Heavy Gunners, this performs actually quite well. Got to set this up to be a test and not a how to kill Excalibur. There we go. There we go. Yeah, so with this, even at this range, you can hit consistent headshots, which is very, very important. Because this is, like, the range that you're going to fight a lot of enemies. And while you may not be engaging enemies of this level, it's important to see what it can do if you were to run into a situation like this. And that was with Stabilizer, obviously. If you strip even more armor, it is, of course, viable to go high voltage instead of Stabilizer. But you will notice that the recoil, even at close ranges, is extreme enough that you would actually not... well, for me personally, I suppose. This is, of course, to taste. Even at close ranges, I wouldn't want to go without this, as I end up missing a lot of shots. So while I'm getting more status and such, like, unless I move closer as I'm doing, you're going to end up missing a lot, and I, like, wouldn't even bother firing this weapon at, like, the initial range we showed with Stabilizer. However, if you're looking for the more procs and you don't mind getting in close, say you're playing as, like, Rhino or Naros or what have you, the extra status can, of course, be a boon. Also, for those of you that weapon recoil can give you a fucking migraine, this is obviously much more pleasant to actually use. So there's that as well. Now, compare that with the Soma Prime. This is, of course, cheaper on the Forma, and we're using this build here. This is just Malignant Force and High Voltage together. Not using Stabilizer because, obviously, the Soma Prime does not need it. The Soma Prime's engagement range is also larger because it just naturally has, like, the higher accuracy, so even being back here, you're going to be just fine. Like, you'll notice a little bit of recoil, but it's nothing too big. And the main advantage in this situation is that the Soma has a much larger clip and can occasionally wipe out both of them, depending on your luck with procs, in one magazine. So with that, Prisma Grakata is pretty close to the Soma Prime, but not quite, but it's mostly to taste. So yeah, that is Prisma Grakata. It's very, very good. And with the Soma Prime vaulting, like, this is a very, very good alternative that I suspect will be quite a bit cheaper in the long run when the Soma Prime inevitably gets very expensive. So with that, that is the Why Would You Support a Prisma Grakata. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you